sessions on a regular basis on a Friday from 12 to 1. We would like to continue this conversation as we are definitely looking to connect with you online. That's our contact information, training with Brenda or Brenda Kasuva, or scanning the QR code on the top right-hand side. This is made possible by a couple of people that we want to thank. One is Kyle Davidson, who is with First Home Mortgage. On the title side, we have Marvin Reese from CLA Title and Escrow. The biggest thank you today goes to Dominic Corson, who is an appraiser and has his own appraisal company. This is his contact information. He is local to the area in Harford County. How we connected is that he teaches one of the GRI classes for those of you who are looking to get the GRI designation, and or if you're looking to become a broker, that is an option you are able to take.
So I want to go over current market conditions and projections, because that's what everybody's talking about. What's going on now? Want to talk about market conditions in context. So what was it like during the last boom? I did a little analysis for that, and just what interest rates have done over the years, just so we can kind of put things in perspective and not totally freak out about what's going on with the market right now. A couple of little new items that I think I wanted to throw into the mix was the ANSI guidelines, American National Standard Guidelines, on how you actually measure a house. So back in April 1st of this year, Fannie Mae required appraisers to use ANSI guidelines. And we'll go over what those are, because it's important when you're measuring a house that you know that we're using consistent numbers. And also, one of the most popular questions that I get from real estate agents is, what's a bedroom? What counts as a bedroom? I'm actually going to give you the lowdown on what that is. And then once we get some of that stuff out of the way, we'll do really what you came here for, was what's the appraiser doing? What's in my mind? What are we talking about? So we're analyzing the market, we're analyzing the property, we're analyzing the sales. And then after all that stuff, we put it together and we reconcile the value. And then once I'm done that, we can do a Q&A. So there are other topics that I'm sure you want to talk about, and we can do that. So let's just start with market conditions. So this is 2021, 2022, 2023, they're projecting. So in 2021, there were, and this is in millions of dollars. So in 2021, in the United States, there were 6.1 million units sold. They're projecting for this year to be 5.1. And then in 2023, they're projecting 4.4 million. So serious drop off in volume. All right. And so that has definite ramifications for your own business, no doubt about it. So, and then they also kind of projected what the interest rates, or what they were and what they're going to be. And you can see already they're way out of date, man. They're way out of date. They have, for this quarter and the next quarter, interest rates to be for 30-year fixed 5.4 and 5.7, where they're already a point behind. And, you know, the Fed's already talking about raising it again, right? So their projections are already way off. They're going to be way off. There's no doubt about it. So that's not a good sign. All right, but it's not the end of the world. So I just wanted, and also real quick, here's historic mortgage interest rates starting from 1970 all the way to the present. And you can see back in 1980, 81, that's when the peak was. Interest rates were 18, 19%. When I got started in the business in 1984, I was at this peak right here, right? It was 15% when I started out. And you can see they dropped all during the 80s a lot. You know, all during the boom of the 80s, they were still over 10%. And then you can see, you know, during the boom of the last, well, what was it, 20 years ago, 15, 20 years ago, early 2000s, interest rates were all 6, 7% interest rates, and we were booming. And then you can see after the crash, the Fed dropped their rates to practically zero. Mortgage rates went down to actually below 3. And so now obviously we're going back up again. But 30 to 60 days is a healthy marketing time in a balanced market. So we're just coming out of a freak period, honestly. So don't get used to that. We're getting back to reality. All right, another thing that I want to bring to your attention is the American National Standard Institute, ANSI guidelines, measuring guidelines. So as of April 1st, Fannie Mae required all appraisers to use ANSI guidelines. Now, I've been using ANSI guidelines my whole life, but this is just a way to have Fannie Mae have consistent ways of measuring a house, because everybody does things differently, and it just makes things it just causes problems for Fannie Mae when they're analyzing data. So the one thing is, basement in any space, any space in the basement, even if it's partially or completely below grade, is considered below grade. So it's not counted in the above ground living area. It's not that it does have contributory value. You have a finished basement, it still has value. It's counted in different sections. So we have to segregate it out, above grade and below grade. Just understand that. And then the other thing is the gross living area calculations, they don't include the floor that's below, if it's unfinished. So if you have a 2-story foyer or a 2-story family room, that section that's cut out does not count as living space. Now, I know you have to be careful, because a lot of times the tax assessors, they do that, they count that. And so be aware of that when you're trying to measure your house and compare it to others. Try to be consistent. Okay. The other thing is, a ceiling height has to be at least 7 feet high. So you get some small bungalows and they have a little attic space and it's got a low ceiling. You have to measure that, because if it's under 7 feet, then it's not going to count as gross living area. I mean, it might still have some space, right? You might still have some livable space, but it doesn't count. And I already talked about the assessors, but the assessor, if the assessor is saying that they're not counting certain area in one of the comparable sales, the appraiser has the discretion to cut that out as well, because we want to make sure we're comparing apples to apples. So if I have a subject property that's got an open foyer and an open family room area, and their gross, the assessment says it's 4,000 square feet, but it's really 3,500 because we're cutting out that other part. When I'm comparing it to the other properties, if I know that those properties have a similar open foyer and open family room area, I can adjust the assessment numbers as well. They give us that discretion, which is good. So just be aware of that. The other thing is, when you're looking at split levels, when you come in, you have the ground level, it might be living room, dining room, kitchen, then you go up 3 steps to the bedrooms, then you go down a few steps to the family room. That little portion down there, a lot of times the assessor counts that in the total gross living area. Appraisers don't, because even if it's just partially below grade, it's not going to count in the above grade living area.
So Dominic,
Yes.
you're saying FNMA is Fannie Mae, right?
Correct.
So then when it's Freddie Mac and FH, I guess, guide me on that.
Yeah, I would say they all follow suit with that.
Okay.
They would all follow suit with that.
Okay.
And I would say the vast majority of appraisers already use this. So it's not going to be a big change in the market, because I think most of us already do that. Some appraisers don't do it. And so now they're forcing you to do it. So there's consistent standards. But I wanted to make agents aware of what we're doing and why we do it, because a lot of times we'll get questions from homeowners. It's like, hey, you called it a 3-bedroom house, but there's one down in that lower level in the split level or split foyer. And it's like, no, I counted it down here, and it still has value, but it's down here. It's not in the total gross living area calculation. So just wanted you to be aware of that. What counts as a bedroom? All right. So this is from, and this also is from realtor.com, just so you know. It's consistent with the IRC, International Residential Code, for a bedroom. So you need a total of 70 square feet. At least one of the walls has to be at least 7 feet long in a horizontal direction. You have to have 2 means of egress, usually like a door from a hallway and then a window. Ingress and egress. and minimal site healing, or seat ceiling height rather, is 7 feet tall, which we talked about. Minimum window size. So, you know, sometimes you see in the basement windows, they have these little windows up high. That doesn't count. It can't be any more than 44 inches high off the floor. And they have to be at least 20 inches by 24 inches wide. You have to be able to get a body through that window. Heating, as long as there's some sort of heating and cooling element, it can be, you know, hot water baseboard, it can be electric baseboard, it could be a mini split system, but just not space heaters. So any sort of heating or cooling element, you're good. And then here's the thing that was crazy is I didn't realize, at least from the code, a closet is not a requirement to be counted as a bedroom, which is interesting. But having said that, you know that the market has its own demands, and you got to have a closet in it to be a bedroom. That's what they demand. So market expectations are a big part of what you're dealing with. So
Hey,
that's,
Dominic, if we
yeah.
go to number 6, does it have to be both or more so?
Oh, no, you don't. Oh, thank you. Yeah, it doesn't have, good point. It does not have to be cooling,
Yes.
but I'm just copying off what the IRC says, but really, it's really heat.
Heat.
You know, they don't care about whether you have air conditioning or not, that kind of comfort, but you definitely have to be heated,
Yeah.
right? Definitely have to have that. So thanks for pointing that out. That's a good point. Appraisers, what we're doing is we're looking at the first step is, and you know, when you do your market analysis, you're doing the same sort of thing, really. I mean, you're doing more of a qualitative thing, and appraisers do more quantitative, where we're going to make actual dollar adjustments for certain things. But this part of the process, you should be doing anyway when you're market. So obviously you're looking at settled sales, pending sales right now, super important to really get a feel for what's going on in the market. Active listings as well, because they kind of set the upper end of the value range or price range for you. I mean, you don't want to be priced over what another competitive active listing's doing. Sometimes withdrawn and expired listings can be useful, especially if they expired or withdrew recently. You might want to find out why. I mean, in this market, not so important, but when you get into a much slower market, it can reveal a lot about what's going on in the market. You know, if you have a house across the street that's just like yours and is listed for 500,000 and they didn't get any sales and was on the market for any offers for 6 months, well, then, you know, you might not want to list your property for 500 because you're going to probably end up with the same fate. Distress sales. So we typically don't use those. Those are non-arm's length transactions. So, but I can tell you back in 09, 10, 11, there were certain neighborhoods where there were an awful lot of distress sales, some bank-owned properties, short sales that were all over the place, and they really dominated certain neighborhoods. And guess what? It was okay to use those because that was the market. That's what was defining what the market was going on, or what was going on in the market rather. So just be aware of that we typically don't use distress sales or non-arm's length transactions. Another thing you want to keep an eye on is marketing time. I think you are seeing marketing time expand a little bit. It might be taking a little bit longer to sell a house. Absorption rate, you know, that's something where what's the rate of number of sales per month in a particular market area. So if you're in a certain neighborhood and they're usually turn over 4 sales a month, and you have 8 active listings right now, well, then you know you have a 2-month supply of real estate. So if you have a seller that needs to sell quickly, you need to be aggressive on the price to get it sold within a reasonable time or within that month period. So absorption rate can be very important if you have the data to use. Forecasting or time of year, that's more of a corporate relocation concept, but nonetheless, it is useful. I know it seems like in recent years, the market really doesn't slow down that much during the winter or even the holiday season. It seems to be pretty consistent. I mean, it slows down a little bit, but there are still sales going on. Listing sale price ratio. So that's important when you don't have a lot of sales and you have some active listings. You do want to know what is the ratio? How much can your seller expect to get based on their listing price? If you have competition from new construction, that's going to be a problem. economic shifts or employment shifts, if you have layoffs, or if you have a plant opening up, that could have an impact. Interest rates, market trends, seasonal, we already talked about that. Demographic trends, seller concessions. So during the last couple of years, typically sellers didn't pay any concessions, but now I think you're starting to see them pop up again. So now let's talk about what appraisers are looking for. We are looking at a bunch of different things. So again, we're not home inspectors. We're looking at what we call readily observable items. So you want to take into account, what kind of paint is it? Fresh paint? Is it a lot of non-neutral paint? What's the carpet or the flooring like? Is it all worn out and stained, or is it brand new? Seems like today a lot of people are putting in the LVP, luxury vinyl plank. That's really popular with builders right now. Appliances, how updated are they? You want to take note of how old stuff is. How old is the HVAC, the roof, the siding, the windows? Do the windows work? If you're going to go if you're in a property where it's FHA, VA, those windows have to work. They have to be able to stay up without propping them up with a stick. They have to be able to lock. So those are important things. Roof, when you're doing an FHA or VA type of property, the appraiser has to make a statement in the FHA or VA appraisal that the roof has at least 2 years of economic useful life. So if you have a roof that's 20, 25 years old, if I'm doing that appraisal, I'm calling for a roofing certification. I'm not taking any chances. Even if there's no signs of leakage, I'm still going to call for a roofing cert, because and a lot of times you can't even get up on the roof. You don't really know. So if it's over 20 years old, I'm going to call for it. And I think here's the one thing about FHA appraisers. It's discretionary. So every appraiser is going to have their own judgment call. So that's how I would handle things. Other appraisers may not. So just be aware of that. And if the owner did make repairs and renovations, was it done in a professional manner? The other thing you would look at is, quality of construction. Is it brick and stone on the outside? You have granite or quartz, countertops, ceramic flooring, wood flooring, built-ins, trim, all this kind of stuff. And also, does it meet market expectations? That's maybe the bigger thing. Is it over-improved for the neighborhood, or is it under-improved? Maybe you only have a 2-car garage, and your neighborhood is $600,000-$700,000 neighborhood, and everybody in your neighborhood has a 3-car garage. 2-car might not cut it. It's going to be a problem, right? So be aware of that. Mortgage underwriting guidelines. I kind of talked about that already with broken windows and leaky roof. Obviously, peeling paint, about that. Any house built before 1979, you have peeling paint. All that stuff has to be scraped and painted. All right, keep on moving. Red flag items. So when you have a really hot market, nobody cares about this stuff. But then when the market gets a little normal, buyers get a little picky, right? They can choose between other properties. They don't have to make a snap decision and just buy the first thing that comes along. And so all of a sudden, these red flag items become way more important. So I would expect that these sorts of things are going to put a damper on sales. I'm not saying you can't sell a house with these items. I'm just saying that these are going to be things that buyers might object to and that you need to deal with and be able to handle it. And part of dealing with it is just making your sellers aware. Managing expectations is a big part of your job. So you need to make your sellers aware. So these are red flag items that appraisers are looking at is, street noise, highway noise, if you're on a busy road, just poor maintenance of the subject, or even the next door neighbor, that can have an impact. Not that we're necessarily going to make an adjustment for it, but hey, and they've got furniture and cars up on blocks in the front yard. That's not cool. That's going to impact your property, right? So, and if you're in close proximity to commercial property, that's going to have a problem. You're going to have a problem with that. You might want to check the zoning to see if you're commercially zoned too, because some lenders have problems with doing a residential loan on commercially zoned property, because if it burns down, depending on the zoning code, it might not be able to be replaced as a house again. So you need to check that stuff out as well. Check your zoning. That's part of your due diligence, I think. Obviously moldy or musty odors, number of bedrooms if they're not, and bathrooms if they're not typical for the area. We talked about under improvement, curb appeal. These are all things near power lines, water towers. You know, if you're within a fall line of one of those towers, FHA, it might have a problem with that. Okay. Strong odors, steep driveway. That always becomes an objection in the wintertime when you're thinking about ice and snow. All of a sudden, it's more prominent. Unusual floor plans can definitely affect marketability and price. Personalized decor. Suspected structural problems. Again, these are readily observable items. These are things that you don't have to be a home inspector to know about. So let's talk about this. This is the most important thing. This is where we get paid, is picking good comparable sales. If you can get good at picking good comparable sales, you don't need to know about making adjustments for fireplaces and square footage. You pick good comps, you're 90% there. Okay, the adjustment part of the appraisal process is fine tuning. So really what it comes down to is picking good comps. And so there's some sort of a comparison with comparable properties. There's a hierarchy of how you pick your comps. So the first two, I think it's 1A and 1B, really is the time of sale and location. So you want to, especially in this market, you want to find properties that have sold as recently as possible that reflect current market conditions, because sales that you have from 2001, they're just not, it's like ancient history. It's not reflecting what's going on today. By the same token, you need location. You know, you want to be in the same neighborhood, same marketing area. It just depends on what kind of comparable sale or what subject property you have dictates what kind of comparable sales you're going to use.
Now with recent time, 90 days, 60 days, 6 months. What are you using?
Well, here, I'll tell you this. It just depends. It depends on the market. So I'm actually doing right now. Yesterday, I was working on some lots, some little like half-acre lots in a water-oriented community in Cecil County, like on the lower, say, Eastern Shore half of it's in a water-oriented community. And all three of my sales were days on market. It was 400, 500, 700 days on the market. So I take them one at a time. Now, if you're doing a 4-bedroom colonial in Bel Air, days on market's 5. Okay. So that's why you look at what you want to do is look at your other comparable sales. You want to look at your pending sales as well to see how long they took to sell, and also look at your active listings. If there's any competitors, like I'm starting to find we can use some active listings. So when appraisers do appraisals now, they have to do a form called the Fannie Mae 1004 MC, market change form. And we have to analyze not only what has sold and segregated into the previous quarters, we have to look at what's active. And there are a lot of times where there's almost no active listing competing with the subject property. Now you're starting to see more active inventory popping up. And so now all of a sudden, you can look at days on market. Now it becomes an important factor when you're trying to analyze the market. So to answer your question, it just depends on the property and the market area in which you're appraising. And then, of course, the more obvious thing is style. You know, you want to compare apples to apples. You want to compare a 2-story to other 2 stories. You want to compare a rancher to a rancher. Sometimes you have a Cape Cod, and it's the only Cape Cod in the neighborhood, and they're all 2 stories of ranchers. So what do you use? Well, the thing with Cape Cods is a lot of times they have the functional utility of both a rancher and a 2-story, because they have bedrooms and a bathroom upstairs, but they also have bedrooms and a bathroom on the first floor. So, you know, if you don't have any other comparable Cape Cods, throw in a rancher, throw in a Cape Cod, it's okay. You know, you have to use, as an appraiser, the 3 best comps, not necessarily the 3 perfect comps, because it's very rare when you get perfect comps. You always have to use your discretion on that. With split foyers and split levels, you can use obviously split foyers and split levels, but also ranchers. You can use a rancher as a comparable to a rancher, or a split foyer and a split level. It's perfectly fine. Quality of construction, obviously you want to have similar quality. And then lot size, again, you want to keep the lot size comparable. You don't want to use a 10-acre property to compare it to a house on a half-acre lot. That would not be fair. And also, if you are doing a property with a lot of acreage, especially in the northern part of Baltimore County or Harford County, you really need to check the development right potential, because the rights themselves have value. So, you know, when we're valuing property, we're not, there's a difference between real property and real estate. The real estate is the physical asset of the land and the improvements. But what you're really valuing is real property. So it's the physical asset of the improvement in the land, but also the rights that go with it, because those rights have value. A lot of people sell their development rights and put them in agricultural easements, right? They do it all the time. People buy the farmland and they sell the rights to the county for some ag easement program. They usually get $6,000 an acre, and then they keep on farming and they take that cash. So it's a pretty interesting concept. So be aware of that when you're doing properties with lots of land. All right, let's keep on going. All right, so adjustments. So appraisers make adjustments for all sorts of things. And I'm going to show you a real sales comparison grid in a second. So we're making adjustments for time. That means market change. If you're using an older sale, you might have to show some appreciation, or even depreciation. That, believe it or not, markets go down and sometimes you have to do that. Location, lot size, quality of construction, condition, gross living area, number of bedrooms, number of bathrooms, basement, garage, decks, patios, porches. You got fireplace adjustments. So I'm going to scroll down and we're going to show an actual sales comparison grid. This is a property that I appraised, and I took the addresses out because I didn't want to divulge any actual properties. But the subject property information is over here on the left column. And here is our comparable number 1, comparable number 2, comparable number 3. Up here is the sale price. And then down here is where we make adjustments for various things. So appraisers have to use a universal code. So we have to use codes for quality of construction and for condition. So a Q3 is good quality. C3 would be good quality. C4 is maybe a little below average. Maybe it needs some updating. C2 would be something that was renovated. C1 is reserved for new houses. And then C2 is a renovated house. So it's an older house that's been updated. So we make adjustments for that. So that's how we appraisers classify houses, by condition and by quality. And so we make adjustments accordingly. And then we have a line here for number of bedrooms, number of bathrooms. These were all consistent, 8, 4, 9, 4, 2.5. We use a 0.1 as half. And then the square footage. Most appraisers, I'm going to tell you, they're going to make adjustments anywhere from, say, $30 to $50 a square foot for most typical houses. Once you get into some custom houses, I've been known to use 60 to maybe $75 a square foot for really super high quality houses. And so obviously it costs more to build than $75 a square foot. But what you're really measuring is that nominal amount, that extra. How much extra is somebody going to pay for that extra 100 square feet? Okay. And so it's the law of diminishing returns. The unit price goes down. It's just like when you go to, BJ's or Costco and you buy things in bulk, you see that the unit price goes down. It's the same thing with houses, same thing. So that's what we're reflecting there. And then we have to make adjustments for any finished area in the bathrooms, in the basements rather, for bathrooms or dens or club rooms. And so when I talked about number of bedrooms count, if it's in the basement or lower level, it's going to be counted down here. Okay. Same thing for heating and air conditioning, garages, fireplaces, patios. And so up here you have the sale price, and you have a series of plus and minus adjustments. You have a net number. And so, okay, it sold for $595, but the subject property was really superior. And so we adjusted up to $625. So that's how it works. And you do that with all your comps, right? Sold for $600. You had to make a couple of plus adjustments, minus adjustments, adjusted up to $620. This one adjusted out at $619. So what would you say the value of that property was worth? $620 to $625, right? Oh, but guess what? The contract's for $640. Now what? It happens all the time, right? It happened the last couple of years. We had that happen many times where I came in under contract price a lot because people were spending 20, 30, 50,000 over list price. It was ridiculous, but the data wasn't showing it. And I would use pending sales or active listings as well to try to the best of my ability, reflect what's going on in the current market. But, you know, if you're an appraiser, I just want you to put yourself in my shoes. You're doing an appraisal on this house and you have a contract for 640, but all your data is doing this. What are you going to do? You're going to come in at maybe 625. You can max, okay, you can make, you know, do a narrative. Hey, we had multiple offers, contract to 640, data, there was enough data to support a value of up to 625. Now it's up to the buyer and seller to renegotiate or cough up more money. And usually it seems like the last couple of years, that's what happened. You didn't really have too many deals fall through. People were prepared, buyers were prepared. They knew that they were probably going to have to kick in a few more dollars to make it happen. And so that's the reality. I don't think it's happening as much. I mean, so now you've got that. So what do? You know, when you're reconciling the price, you know, you analyze the market, you analyze the trends, you're looking at the, you know, what a reasonable list price is, what the most probable sale price is. Do you use an average? Do you use a weighted average? So when I'm working for a bank, or when an appraiser is working for a bank, or even when I do estate appraisals and I'm working for the Register of Wills, they want a single number. Okay, I got to pin one number down on that property, which I don't really like doing because it really implies an accuracy that doesn't exist. I mean, nobody's that good that they can say that's the number, no more, no less. That's ridiculous. But I like to give a range, and that's what I think you should do when you're working with your buyers or with your sellers rather, and say, hey, look, you know, based on the comparable sales, the most probable sale price should fall between X and Y, and give them that range. Because what happens is if you give a homeowner a single number and say, okay, I think this house is worth 625, and then they get an offer for 620, they're going to feel like, oh man, they're giving it away. They're selling it for less than market. And that's ridiculous, right? Nobody's that good. And so if you give folks a range where they can expect to see an offer, I think that makes them feel a whole lot better, more comfortable about accepting an offer that's reasonable and supported by data.
So as a listing agent, what do you appreciate from our side?
Oh, what would you,
Yeah.
What do you need? What do I need from you as a listing agent? That's a real, thank you. That's a really good question. So, you know, when I was trained as a real estate agent back in '84, I worked for Merrill Lynch Realty. I had a 2-week training course. It was great. It was like, you know, it was 80 hours. It was really good training, but we were always trained that you meet the appraiser at the property with comps. Now, I'm not going to hold it against you if you don't show up. I mean, you're busy and a lot of times you can't be at 2 places at one time. So, but at the very least, you should at least communicate with that appraiser, and you should have comps to support that price. You just can't pick a number out of the air and just say, well, that's what the seller wanted, and we're just going to roll the dice and just hope it appraises. Well, all bets are off when I come in and you don't give me any comps. So you want to have good comps that support your price, but you also want to, and a lot of agents already do this, they make a bullet point list of features and also updates, because when I'm at a property, I'm asking the homeowner, how old is the roof? How old are the windows? When was the kitchen renovated? All that stuff. How old is the HVAC? How old is the flooring? That goes into the whole equation. So anything you can do to make your case to the appraiser before he sends in the appraisal. Okay, you do not want to get in a situation you have to go to the lender and appeal the appraisal because it's low. You want to make a preemptive strike, and you want to meet that appraiser out there, and you want to brag about the property, show them all the features about the property, all the updates that are with it, and the comparable sales to support your numbers. And if you do that, I think you'll be in good shape, because it's so hard to appeal an appraiser or an appraisal to get an appraiser to change their mind. Really difficult, because nobody wants to admit they're wrong. So if you're going to appeal the appraisal, you have to say, hey, here's some new information maybe you weren't aware of, because you have to, it's kind of a face-saving kind of thing, honest. It's like human nature, and you don't want to make the appraiser defensive, where all of a sudden they're admitting to their lender client that they made a mistake or they missed something. So anything you can do to help them out ahead of time is usually appreciated by the appraiser. Now, I've taught agents for 25 years, and so I always hear stories about how some appraisers are really kind of rude, and they throw comps back in your face. I don't need these, and they throw them back. That's just rude. I don't do that. The MLS, I'm sure it's happened to you, where you do searches on multiple lists and you do it a second time and you find stuff you didn't see the first time. You miss things. It happens a lot. So I always try to keep an open mind, and I always ask the agent, hey, if you have any comparable sales you think I should consider, please give them to me. Not that I'm already going to do my job, but I could miss things. Or maybe you sold the house down the street and that was a real train wreck inside. So yeah, the pictures looked okay, but hey, it smelled like dog, or it was really filthy inside, or the cabinets were busted up, or whatever that didn't really show up in pictures. You need to be able to explain that to the appraiser. So when he makes his adjustments for condition, he can do a narrative and say, hey, this comparable sale down the street sold for this, but it was in inferior condition because of XYZ, or maybe it had a really slopey lot in the back and that was a detractor. Whatever it might be, you need to be able to provide the appraiser with as much information as possible. It just makes their job so much easier.
Yes, so you get there and there are 2 stoves. One in the kitchen, one in the basement, and it's not zoned multi-unit.
Well, when I do conventional stuff, I don't worry about it, because it's still not an in-law suite. And you can call it an accessory unit. We have a little box on the appraisal form that says accessory unit, check. Whatever, it doesn't mean anything, right? As long as the zoning says you're not allowed to rent it out as a 2-unit house,
Right.
and then you're probably okay. I know sometimes at FHA, they'll say, hey, you need to cap that, take that stove out and cap the gas. And if you have to play that game, so be it. You know what I mean? And then once they're done, you put it back in and everybody's back to status quo ante, right?
Yeah. When you were looking at the range of your square footage on your example of the appraisal, it looked like you were within like 100 to 200 square feet. Like, is there a math for us to use?
Oh, okay. Well, so I'm trying to look at this. I'm just eyeballing it. It looks like I was using $40 a square foot. So my appraisal software has an automatic calculator. So that's where it gets all these numbers. So in this particular case, I was a little under 100 square feet difference. So if I'm using $40 a square foot, 40 times whatever it is, 90 square feet or 95 square feet is plus 3,800. So what that really means is, okay, so it's almost like algebra and you're solving for X. Mm-hmm. Okay, this house sold for $595, all things being equal, and the only difference was the square footage, and it was just 95 square feet less. Everything else was the same. Well, then my subject was $3,800 more valuable because it had 95 more square feet. That's basically what it means. Same thing with, the porch. This particular property had extensive hardscaping around the patio. It was amazing. I don't normally make adjustments for that, but it was like super awesome. So I had to give them something because it was beautiful. And this patio was really modest. So I made an adjustment there. Had an in-ground pool. So I made a plus 1,500. Now we know that in-ground pools might cost $50, $60, $75, $100,000. We know what the cost is, but what's the contributory value? It's much less. I've done multiple paired sales analysis. I've done surveys of buyers of houses with pools, and you can say there's a range of 10 to 15. Now, some pools in high-end neighborhoods, I mean, it's like a resort back there. They got all kinds of hardscaping and a pool house, and it's amazing. So I'm going to obviously make a bigger adjustment for that one. Okay. But that's how you do it. It's just a series of plus and minus adjustments from the, pluses and minuses from the sales price, and then it gives you adjusted prices down here. So that's your sale price range down on the bottom. Okay.
Thank you. So probably to the bigger conversation. Appraisal is a lot about how you feel and what your insight is, which all of us have biases. So, and we're seeing in the news how biases are affecting the value of some properties. So what's going on your mind with that?
All right, so a couple of things. Yeah, there have been some very high profile ones, including one in Baltimore. It went nationwide. I mean, national media was all over it. The homeowners were on TV telling their story about how they had one appraisal that was low, and they thought that was not fair because they put so much money into renovations. And so they got another appraisal done. But before they did that, what they call, the term is whitewashed it. So they took all the pictures and whatever out of the house that would, give a hint that it might be a black family in the neighborhood, in the house. And then they brought their white friend in to basically pretend to be the homeowner. And then the second appraisal came in a lot higher. And so therefore, they surmised that there must be racial bias. Mm-hmm. Okay, so a couple of things. Because look, I've got my own, we all have our own worldview and our own perspective. And so I reached out to some of my black friends, and I reached out to 3 different black appraisers. Oh, just so you know, appraisal, real quick. The appraisal business is the whitest profession in the country. It's 96.5% white. And that's not speculation. If you go to Bureau of Labor Statistics, they analyze 400 different professions and it's the whitest. And actually it's 75% male. So it is what it is. So let's get that out of the way. But I had talks with friends, and I've known these guys for like 30, 35 years. We're good friends. And so they can kind of open up to me. So I wanted to get their perspective on things. So 2 of them thought that racial bias in appraisals really is not an issue. Okay. One appraiser, he had one experience with a property that he sold as an investor, and he feels like there might have been something going on there. But I think we all agreed that it's really hard to prove. It's really, how do you prove what somebody's intent is, or what's in their mind or in their heart when they do what they do, whether it's conscious or unconscious, right? So how do you deal with it? So I think most of us, or all of us, really thought, okay, that's a really hard standard. So if you're going to sue an appraiser for racial bias, that's a really tough standard where you're going to go to court and you're going to have to prove that was the person's intention. So unless they made some sort of insensitive remarks in the conversation or during the inspection, I mean, sometimes it just comes down to difference of opinion. And so if you do have an appraisal, or if you encounter an appraisal that's really low or just egregiously way off the mark, you already have a process. You would turn that appraisal into the appraisal commission, and they'll review it. And they have review appraisers that handle that sort of thing. And so you can say, hey, look, we think there might be something going on here. And so if it's an appraisal that's way out of line, if it's just negligent, or the appraiser was incompetent or inaccurate, they're going to get busted for that. So what's the difference whether they're getting busted for racial bias or incompetence? It's the same value. So I'll give you a perfect example of a property I did. I do a lot of farm appraisals. Like I said, I did a farm appraisal up in Cecil County not that long ago, like 2 weeks ago, and it was for an estate. So the family they have an 80-acre farm. Mom and dad died. They need to have it appraised for the register of wills, and they also want to sell it to maybe a family member. So they get one local appraiser. He comes in at like $750. Really, the family is freaking out. Hey, man, this is really low. So they get another appraiser, and the next appraiser they get is, in my opinion, the best farm appraiser in Maryland. She was with Farm Credit for a minute. She just retired, but she was with Farm Credit. She's the best. I might be second best. I'm pretty good at farm appraising. That's what I do. But she's my go-to person. So if I have a question about farms or contributory value of buildings, I'm calling her. She's a farm girl. She grew up in a farm, and she's the best appraiser I know. So she came in at 1.4 million. So you got one appraisal at 750. You got another appraisal at 1.4. I did my thing. I came in at 1.3. They shared the first appraisal with me, and it was a totally incompetent appraisal. Two of the man's 3 comps I personally appraised. So I had firsthand knowledge of these properties, and they went outside of Cecil County into Harford County for the comps. And one of the comps was an auction. It was like a contested property. It was an estate and a divorce all at the same time. It was a real mess. Way below market. The other one was like a 30-acre house with 30 acres, not even a farm. And then the other one was the comps were ridiculous. All the people in this transaction were white. I mean, I'm the closest thing to a minority being Italian, right? That was, that was it. And so in that case, you couldn't really pin it on any kind of bias. It was just incompetence. Also, I do a lot of corporate relocation work where they always send out 2 appraisers. We never come in at the same number. A lot of times we're out of a 5% spread. Sometimes we're at 8% spread and they have to get a 3rd appraisal. It has nothing to do with bias. It's just difference of opinion. So to answer your question, is there bias from talking to my buddies? Yeah, there probably is. The reality is it probably is there. Not probably, it is there. Okay, whether it's conscious or unconscious, totally acknowledge that. My point is, how do you prove it? It's really hard to prove, but I'd say that if you do come across an appraisal that's a train wreck, or it's really way out of line, you have a process. There's a process, and they will review the appraisal, and that they will spank that appraiser for coming in and doing if they violate USPAP, or Uniform Standards of Professional Appraisal Practice, you can get them for that. But really tough to prove. Now, I will tell you this, that I just found out last week that apparently the Appraisal Commission will be requiring a 2 to 4, they haven't figured out, 2 to 4 hour seminar on racial bias in appraisals. So that will be a mandatory class. So we will be taking those classes. So that's a good thing. I mean, I think people should be aware of what's going on and be sensitive to it. And so I think once they take this class and what's been going on in the news, I think they're going to be a little more sensitive to it and say, okay, I better mind my P's and Q's. So that's probably a good thing.
Challenge maybe posed back could be that if the appraiser is speaking to me and I sense bias, can we ask for a different appraisal? That's question 1. And then I have experienced where when we're reading the appraisal report, it was there, like they wrote it down, what they thought about that particular area and the people right in the appraisal report.
Wow.
So I know you're sharing that there's a process for complaint, but by the time the buyer is putting that forth to the I guess the appraisal commission, they might have lost the house. So is it all through the lender? Like once
I guess, well, that might be the first step. That's a good question. The first step would be the lender or the appraisal management company. And so I promise you, if you go to a lender and you say, hey man, or the appraisal management company, and you think there's this guy or this appraiser is doing things in the appraisal that we think is biased, because and you just point examples, here's what we think, then I'm not going to guarantee it, but I'll bet you they would be like, hey, you know what? Let's just get a second opinion. Okay. They would nip it in the bud right away. If they're smart, that's what they would do. Okay. So yeah, if you see anything like that, definitely that would be first step number 1. Go to the lender, and then they would go to the appraisal management company, and they would address it there. And then if you don't get satisfaction there, I guess you either go to another lender, or, if you've really been damaged in some way, then you got to complain to the appraisal commission. You might, even when it's all said and done, you might still want to send that appraisal into the commission, say, hey, look, we had a second appraisal. Here's the first appraisal. It's got all these comments about X, Y, and Z, clearly biased. Yeah, you should be weeding those people out, because it's very unprofessional, for one thing.
Right.
Let alone just being stupid and ignorant.
Thank you. Well, Dominic, thank you so much. We'll see whether we can bring you back again another time.